One of the things I love about the holiday season, at least in my part of the world, is it's the point in the calendar at which the days stop getting shorter and start getting longer. And so we celebrate, we find a way to see our families, we see our friends, we celebrate our relationships, and we try to bring light to all of this darkness. One of the ways people have traditionally done this is by bringing a light source to the inside or outside of their homes. Previously it was candles, now it's electric lights. Every little house you see that's all lit up with these little tiny sparkly lights is trying to bring some light to these really long, cold, dark nights. I had some Christmas lights lying around, and I wanted to figure out an inventive way to celebrate with everybody else. People do all sorts of creative, inventive things with string lights. One of the things I always wanted to make was one of those big 2-foot string light balls, so I thought I'd give it a go. So off to the garage I went, and I gathered some stuff. As you can see in the background there, I made a prototype. You can't be good at anything if you don't practice, and the problem with a lot of DIY stuff is people do stuff once, it doesn't work, and they don't really understand why. It didn't work because you're not an expert. The way to become an expert? Practice. Doing something the second time around is always going to be better than doing it the first time around. Sometimes it takes 3 or 4 times, or 5. So I made a prototype. You can see it sparkling there in the background, and these are the tools I used to make it. I'm going to try to make another one and see how much better I can make it. So there's some aluminum tubing there, which is about 12 inches long. There's obviously some chicken wire. You can see there's 2 pieces of chicken wire. Chicken wire tends to come in sort of a 2-foot wide roll. I needed to cut that in half to make it more manageable. I used an angle grinder and just cut right through the package, like right through the package. There's some gloves in there, some eye protection as you can see. That's some 2000 grit sandpaper you see sitting there in front. There's some wire cutters and some pliers. The wire cutters are Knipex wire cutters. Those are really good wire cutters. I really like them. They cut through anything, aircraft cable, whatever you want. They've always been trusty to me. And some 12 gauge multi-purpose wire. It comes in a package of like 100 feet. There's a drill sitting there in the back. That's optional. I'll show you how I used it later. So the first thing I did was grab the aluminum tubing and just give it a quick rub with some 2000 grit sandpaper. That takes off any markings that the maker may have put on the tubing. It also takes off any scuffs or grime and sort of polishes it up. 2000 grit sandpaper is really more like a polishing grit than it is like a sanding grit. If you really want to make it shiny and smart, well then, start with 100 grit, then work your way up to 2000 grit. For my purposes, this was just going to sit inside of the ball, and I thought, well, I just want to clean it up a little bit. So 2000 grit sandpaper does the job. My next step was to try to straighten out this wire. So it comes in a bale and it's wound around itself really tightly. It's really unwieldy and hard to use. It's hard to use, it's hard to measure too. Best way to make sure your sphere is round is to make sure that you're comprising it of equal lengths of wire. You can't measure wire if it's unwieldy, bouncy, springy, and fighting you every step of the way. The way I know how to straighten wire is to put one end of it in a bench vise, put the other end of it in your drill, and turn maybe 8-10 times in each direction. Eventually all the springiness and kinks work out of it, and you end up with a straight wire. I cut 6 lengths of 5 feet each. The next step is to take each of those 6 5-foot pieces of straight wire and bend them into semicircles using the tube as a core. Since each straight length is approximately the same, I know that if I bend them all the same, I'll get the same kind of radius with each piece. I inserted one end of the first straight wire all the way down the tube and bent over about 1.5 inches at the end. I then wrapped the other end of the wire in a semicircular shape all the way over to meet its friend, pushed it past and all the way through the tube to the other side. I then bent the end over about 1.5 inches again. At this point, I had one semicircle around my core, and it wasn't going anywhere. It was pretty strong. I did this with all the other remaining pieces of wire, and what I was left with was something that was basically like an atom-shaped sphere thing. The important thing is that it was pretty strong and it was reasonably circular. It looked pretty spherical to me, and it was going to hold up under pressure. So when I bent the chicken wire around it, it was going to hold onto that chicken wire pretty well. Chicken wire comes wrapped really tightly in its package. It's really hard to work with. So I found just using the edge of the table really helped to sort of bend some of that massive, nasty curve out of the chicken wire and made it a lot easier to use. Chicken wire is pretty tough to work with, so I made sure my arms were covered, my hands were covered with gloves, and I was wearing eye protection. I used my wire cutters to cut off a piece that would wrap around my sphere. Since we're going to be putting something that conducts electricity around this item, we want to make extra sure that any of the pointy bits that come from cutting chicken wire are pointing in to the center of the sphere. You don't want the pointy ends of the chicken wire left over from cutting it to potentially poke through the insulator of the string lights, causing a short. So at this point I have my atom-shaped frame and I have one width of chicken wire wrapped all the way around and it's bound to itself. It's not really going anywhere. The next step is to put another wrap of chicken wire around at 90 degrees to the first one. You're sort of making a plus sign. So I did my second chicken wire wrap at 90 degrees to the first, and at this point, once I cut it and bend it onto itself, I've basically got most of the sphere covered. I could see the corners were still open, and I thought about just leaving it, but then I thought, nah, I'm gonna fill this out and make this a proper sphere. The string lights deserve better. So now, since I went to the step of making the frame first and then stretching the chicken wire over top of it, the chicken wire was taut enough and strong enough that I had a fairly strong sphere. Any part of the sphere that I thought didn't look quite right, it wasn't quite round, it was a little flat, it was a little bumpy, whatever, I could just pull, push, prod. It was malleable and I could make it look more spherical because I had built the frame, I had stretched the chicken wire tight, and this thing was strong enough it could take it. At this point I was reasonably happy with the sphere, not bad for my second try, pretty round. So it's time to start adding the string lights. I had some old style of Christmas lights lying around. I really like the way they look. I think they glow a little warmer. I think they're a little brighter, but they're also a little more dangerous. They plug right into the electrical current that comes out of an outlet. That means there's AC current running right through each and every string. If I was going out to buy new string lights, I think I would probably buy LED string lights. LED lights tend to run on DC current. There's a little box on the end of the cable. You plug that into the AC current in the wall. That converts it to a much lower voltage, usually 12 volts or something like that, and that goes through the bulb. So if you do have an issue where over the years or because of the wind outside or whatever it is, the cabling becomes frayed or there's a short, it's a lot less dangerous. I had these Christmas lights, I didn't want them to go to waste. So I'm using them, and if I'm gonna use them, I better plug them in and check them before I wrap them all around the ball just to be sure. I started wrapping the string lights by using a cable tie to secure the string lights to the top of the ball. You know that the string light end is going to be where there's a potential source of force. Someone could yank on it, the dog could walk into it, whatever. And so I just wanted to make sure that it was securely attached to the ball. I didn't want to use wire to secure the string lights to the ball for the obvious reason that if there's pulling on the cable, that could eat through the insulation on the cable eventually and cause a short again. These happen to be the icicle style of string lights, so there's like a master cable and then offshoots of lights that come off of that cable. That's fine. Any old style will do. You could take a straight string and just wrap it. In this case, what I did was I sort of wrapped the master cable around and then just found a way to weave the other little strands of icicles into the ball. Every time I found something sharp on my ball, I made sure to push it in, and I made sure that all of the cabling was on the outside of the ball where there were no sharp ends. For a ball of this size, I found about 200 lights worked. You could put a little more, maybe 300 would be super sparkly. It just depends on how sparkly you want your ball. How sparkly a person are you? Once all the string lights were attached and woven and not going anywhere, you could pretty much pick up this thing and let it flap in the wind and nothing was gonna move. I felt like it was safe. I also really liked how it looked. I dimmed the lights in the garage to take a look. It's kind of like creating winter inside. Look at those glow. Holy smokers. Well, there you have it. Pretty sparkly balls, about 2 feet wide that can go anywhere. If you're gonna put them outside, make sure to use outdoor bulbs. It's gotta say that on the box because outdoor bulbs have an insulation that keeps moisture from getting inside and causing a short. If you're gonna hang them inside, either indoor or outdoor will work. And in the end, I think my second ball actually was better than my first ball. So sparkly. So thanks very much for watching right to the end. If you could like or subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. But hey, even if you don't, leave a comment in the section below. Let me know what you think. Comments help me make the channel better, and that's what I want. Happy holidays to everybody. I hope this helped you out.